Hello, and welcome. Good morning, wherever you are in the world. And thank you so much for joining me. And thank you to those of you who enjoyed last week's live. I've decided I'm actually going to do probably a weekly live for certainly the next few weeks. And this gives you an opportunity to join me if you can, or ask me questions. And you can also post questions ahead if you have specific questions you want me to answer on the live. But yes, so for the next few weeks, I'll be going live every Friday morning in the UK. So please try and join me if you are interested in all of this about your voice. So today we're talking about why you fear public speaking and how we can begin, or how you can begin to really enjoy using your voice, because that's really the whole point. I want you to actually really love your voice and enjoy using your voice. That's the whole purpose of really everything I do. We've been given this incredible instrument by nature, and let's just enjoy it and use it. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Anuska Taylor. I'm an executive voice coach, and I'm a Jungian life coach and a singer-songwriter. And actually, when I combine all three of these different areas, it actually really helps me to work with clients at a much deeper level, both the technical functional aspect of voice, the psychology behind why you're using your voice the way you are, and how to break free, which is really important. And also with my sort of performers, singer-songwriter hat on, I can help you also with the creative aspect of speech and the expression and the dynamics, because that's also really important as well. So it's a kind of multifaceted approach. So it's not going to be a big surprise. I think I've read somewhere, and I'm not sure how official this study was, but people had said that they feared death more than public speaking. I'm not sure how you know that, but anyway. And it's really interesting because I think universally, everyone fears public speaking to a greater or lesser extent, and including myself. And I think that for those people who appear to be very confident public speaking and appear to have it all together, I guarantee they've done a lot of work around getting good, getting comfortable, getting confident with public speaking. They haven't just woken up and suddenly been able to do it. So I do think the people that you might perceive do it easily have usually done quite a lot of work in the background. So the popular advice, though, with public speaking is just to practice. And this is the same with everything. It's like, become a better singer, just practice. Become a better speaker, just practice. And actually, yes, there's some truth to that. Of course, you do need to practice. But practice alone is not going to change what's really at the root of the issue. And that's what I want to talk about today. Because yes, you do need to practice. Yes, you do need to train your voice. Yes, you do need to put yourself out there. Absolutely 100%. But if you don't address what's really driving your voice and what's really driving the fear and integrating that, you're always sort of dancing on the surface, and there's always going to be an element of fear. But also, most importantly, you are not truly ever free. So you're always going to feel some level of anxiety, but you might just get good at pushing it away. So really, we want you to feel fully free and expressive when you speak, because that's what nature intended. That's why we've been given this voice in the first place. So let's look at this. So when we think about young children, and when I talk about young children, I mean under 5. So toddlers, very young children. If you spend any time around young children, whether you've got your own or nieces or nephews, or you can remember back to being a young child yourself, young children do not, generally speaking, unless they've had a really traumatic first few years of their life, young children do not have a problem with expression. And you may remember this in yourself or maybe not. Children love to make sounds, they love to make noise, they just love showing up and copying and mimicking and playing around with sound. So children absolutely love it. And I spend a lot of time with my nieces, and there's a lot of noise. They scream, they shout, they are completely unafraid to express themselves. And now that is all of us. And again, I'm generalizing, but for most of us, that is where we started life, because this is our true voice that's coming out. And it's somewhere along the line that voice gets shut down. And this is what I want to talk about today. The conditioning or the programming that we have that shuts the voice down. Because I talk about this a lot. I say that your voice is a product of your conditioning until you wake up, until you do the shadow work, until you integrate the shadow work. It's a product of your conditioning. But you don't know, because conditioning is really what we've all sort of agreed is how we live and what we do. We don't even know we're conditioned until we wake up to the fact that we are conditioned and we're just following the herd, as Jung would say. So we're going to look at this both in terms of the personal conditioning and also the more collective conditioning. So what we've been personally told is and isn't acceptable, but also just more broadly, universally, what have we agreed as a society, as a culture, as a world, that this is how it is, this is how you do things. So we've got to look at it from both sides of the fence. Now, the thing is, what you're going to see with all of this conditioning is it's really about shutting the voice down. To a greater or lesser extent, we have all been conditioned to shut our voice down. And it then makes absolute sense that when you come to public speak, you are going to be scared because you've spent your entire life, whether you're realizing it or not, in some way being taught on some level to shut your voice down. And now you're being asked to stand on a stage and speak. So, really, really important. So, the conditioning is going to depend, obviously, on the country you grew up in, where you spent the most time, the generation that you've been brought up in. So, if you're in your teens or your 20s, you're going to have a very different outlook on life to if you're in, say, your 30s or 40s or 50s or 60s. Because apart from anything else, I mean, social media is a relatively recent concept. And so if you're in your 30s or older, you grew up in a world where wasn't social media and we didn't have mobile phones, which seems like really strange to say that, but obviously that was a thing. So there's that as well, and also your upbringing, the upbringing that you had within your family. So, and that's going to look different for different people. So let's start with the family conditioning. This is really where the personal conditioning comes in. And you can grow up in the same family, you can have siblings, but you can have all perceived your upbringing in a different way. So, you could have, I mean, I've got a brother and a sister, and we're all quite different. Even though we had the same parents, the same house, the same education, you could argue, kind of. And yet we're all quite different. We all see the world through slightly different lenses. So that's really where the conditioning comes in. It's not just the fact that you had the same parents, it's your perception of that world that you grew up in. So the first thing you want to think about is, what was the messaging you personally perceived you got around your voice? So, for example, were you talked over? Did you feel ignored? Were you told to shut up, to stop talking? Or were you told that you're really shy and you never have anything to say? And what's wrong with you? Why don't you say something? When you did speak, were you criticized? Were you judged? Were you ridiculed? So all of that, and you have to really start to think about that. Now, the conditioning, as I said, sort of toddlers, we only really start to get conditioned from around 5 or 6 years old. Up until that point, we're actually more our true self, the true authentic self, and then this conditioning starts to kick in. So we're talking here from about the age of 5 or 6 onwards. So you may or may not remember those early days, but just start to think back to, what was the conditioning? Maybe if you grew up in a family with lots of siblings, maybe you had to be loud to get your needs met. Maybe you had to shout over everyone else. Or maybe you did the opposite. Maybe you just shut down because it was just too hard. Everyone's just talking, everyone's just shouting over everyone, no one's listening to anyone, so I'm just going to not say anything. So again, how we perceive that and how we respond is going to be very, very individual. But I guarantee in some shape or form, there will be some element there of, it's not okay for me to really be heard. This isn't to blame parents or caregivers. This is just human nature. The other way you can think about this as well is, even if, people were around, were people on devices or watching TV or reading the newspaper, or were they present with you? So even if they were lovely when they were, did speak to you, were they present? So my mum, for example, was always had the TV on, always had the TV on, and always had a newspaper in front of her. Even if she was cooking, she'd have a newspaper and she'd have the TV on or whatever she was doing. So she was never actually present, and I never felt heard by my mum. And that was a struggle for me, which is, I think, why I'm so passionate about this work now, because I see how important it is. And even though my mum was very loving in lots of ways, I really struggled with the fact I never felt heard as a child. So it could be that your parents are physically there or your caregivers are physically there, but maybe they don't really listen. Maybe they're distracted. Maybe they're doing something else all the time. And they never really give you their time. They're never really fully listening to you. Just think about things like eating together and having dinner. Do you sit round the dinner table and eat as a family, or did you sit round the table and, eat as a family? Or were you plonked in front of the TV to eat? Now, there's no judgment here, because actually, I grew up in a home where we did eat together, but no one listened to each other. So we might as well have been sitting in front of the TV. So it really, there's no right or wrong. It's just starting to bring awareness to this, because this is going to tell you a lot about why you use your voice the way you do. And what was the other thing I was going to say here? I think just generally start to pay attention more broadly about how you felt listened to or not, whether you felt safe to express yourself or not, whether you felt heard when you did speak. So start to listen, start to sort of bring some awareness to that. And again, this is not about blaming or judging those people. They did the best that they could, but you've got to really start to see that this has absolutely impacted your voice, the voice that you have today, until you start to bring awareness and integrate it. So that's family. So this is really where the personal conditioning starts to be formed. And as I say, probably from around the age of 5, 6 onwards is really when the ego starts to develop. Up until that point, we're probably our most true self that we'll ever be, until we wake up. So the next one is education. So there's 3 areas I'm focusing on here. Sorry, I should have said that at the beginning, around conditioning. So we've looked at family. We're going to talk now about education. Now, again, I'm generalizing here, and I'm not talking here if you went to a specific school for arts or you went to a special drama school or something. I'm talking here about the average person that goes to an average school with your average education, not if you went to a special theatre school. So in most cases with education, reading and writing is given priority. And speaking really takes a back seat. And just start to think about your own education and how much you really got encouraged to speak. Because actually, for most people, you could go through your entire educational system and never really have to speak. Because reading and writing is really favored, and reading and writing, don't get me wrong, is important. But it's also, we're just missing out on that speaking side of things. So for me personally, for example, at my school, we had some options available for speaking. So, for example, Toastmasters that you might have heard of, they came into our school and ran like a public speaking mini training, but you didn't have to do it. You didn't have to go. There was no you weren't forced to do it. So a lot of people didn't. And I did it, obviously, because that was part of my world anyway. And so I'm not really including myself in this because I was always doing singing and acting and stuff. But my point being that these options were available, but you didn't have to take them. So again, you could have just sailed through your education system and not really used your voice. So that's one, for example, for me. Another one that some schools have, again, you don't have to do it, is a debating society. And again, it's just not something that as a child you could just not do it. So these are some examples of where we might be encouraged to use our voice and to speak, but you don't have to do it. So I don't want to do it. It's too uncomfortable. I'm just not going to do it. So start to think about your education system, sorry, your education, whether you went to school, college, university, like whatever you've done, and how much speaking did you really have to do? And were you able to get out of it if you didn't want to do it? And just start to pay attention to that. The other aspect of this is around teachers. Now, I spent a long time living in Australia. I lived in Melbourne for 12 and a half years ish. And at that time, so it wasn't that long ago, I came back to the UK. But I spent quite a bit of time. Lots of comments here from, is it Subrata? I'm glad that this is relating. I'm glad that you're able to feel that this is relating to you. So what was I saying? Yes, so I spent a lot of time in Australia working with teachers. And teachers, as I found out, are not really given any training in using their voice, which is crazy because it's actually the instrument they're using to deliver education to pupils and students. But generally speaking, they're not. And I went into some schools and delivered some workshops. I also ran my own private workshops for teachers. And there was a real need for this because teachers, as a general rule, really struggle with their voice. They take time off because they get sick, they lose their voice, they're really stressed, their voice is really tired. They're not given the tools in how to use their voice. And it's a real shame because I actually think it should be part of teacher training, but it's not. I mean, maybe it's changed now, but certainly when I was doing these workshops a few years ago, and it might be different in Australia as well, but certainly this was not stuff that teachers were being taught. And at best, like with what I did, they might be sent on a day workshop or a half day workshop, but you're not going to change your voice in half a day or a day. There's got to be a consistency of practice. So what I realize with all of this is the voice is just not given any priority. And these are people that are teaching our youth of today. They are there to impart knowledge, but really when you think back to your favorite teachers, your favorite subjects at school, I guarantee it's the teachers that brought the subject to life, that they brought enthusiasm and passion to what they talked about. And it almost, I would argue, doesn't almost really matter what the subject was, because there were subjects that I really enjoyed because of the way it was taught, which actually I didn't really, I would say, have a massive interest in, but because of the teacher and their enthusiasm and their passion, which came through in their voice, versus maybe the subjects that I thought I loved, but they weren't delivered in a way that was actually engaging. Now, again, this is not to judge or blame teachers. This is just an observation that this is a world that is really saying the voice doesn't matter. Even the teachers that are teaching our children, and they need their voice. They absolutely need their voice. They are not given the training. Or they might be given like a 2-hour workshop and that's it. And then you've got to figure it out for yourself. But it's crazy to me. And so it's not only in terms of how the information is being delivered, but it's also just the unconscious message we're sending that the voice doesn't really matter. You know, as long as you've got the knowledge and the expertise, we don't really care how you deliver it. And I feel it's such a shame. And so unconsciously, through our education system, we are getting this message that the voice doesn't matter. You don't really need to use your voice. Even the teachers that are teaching you stuff, they don't really know how to use their voice. They're not really given the support or the training, and they are really struggling with their voice. And I have seen this, and not just teachers actually in schools, but lecturers. I've worked with lecturers as well. Just the insane hours they are expected to speak for, but they're not given any training. So often I end up working with these people because they fund it themselves. They fund the training for themselves because it's not actually provided. So think about your own education. Start to think about how much speaking you were encouraged to do versus, say, reading or writing. Think about the teachers that taught you and the subjects that you enjoyed the most. I guarantee it's the ones that had enthusiasm and passion in their voice when they spoke. The third aspect of conditioning is culture. And again, I mean, obviously, this is going to vary from country to country. So I can only generalize here, but I think the way I can generalize culture is around social media. I think there's very few places in the world now where we don't have the internet and people don't have mobile phones. There are some, granted, but I'm talking about the majority of the world. And what this has created is a culture of people don't really speak to each other. People don't really use their voice. Think about it, and I'm as guilty of this as well. If you need to send someone a message, I bet it's very unlikely that you pick up the phone and you speak to that person. You probably send them a text message, a WhatsApp message, a DM, a Facebook message, a LinkedIn message, fill in the blank. But how often do we actually pick up the phone and speak to each other? And sometimes I find it really frustrating because you just want to speak to a human versus having to go through a chat. I mean, even these chat things now, you're trying to get something resolved with a big company, a big organization, and they make you deal with it through a chat. Even Facebook do this. It's really frustrating. You can't speak to a human. So the whole system is set up for no one's speaking to anyone. Let's all hide behind text messages, chats, DMs, emails, WhatsApps. Let's not use our voice. But actually, when we do use our voice, we can convey things far quicker and we don't get information lost in translation. You can pick up the tone of someone's voice really quickly. So there's that aspect. And again, more broadly, we're saying the voice doesn't matter. So you don't need to speak to anyone, just send them a text message. And I think it's encouraging this kind of behavior of sort of hiding and not actually just being honest and having a real conversation with people. The other aspect of this, though, I think is the cultural sort of conditioning now. We have very short attention spans. We really have an inability to listen for very long. And we're bombarded with content on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever you are. It's just constant 24/7. You could just sit and watch videos or read people's blogs all day long. So it feels kind of overwhelming. But the trouble with this, and you might think, well, what's that got to do with the voice? But when we have a short attention span and we struggle to listen, even if we're having a conversation with someone and we get really distracted and we start fiddling with our phone or looking around the room, when we struggle to really engage and pay attention, we are going to assume that when we speak, people aren't going to listen to us. Even if that's not conscious, you will, whatever you do, you're going to assume you're going to get the same back. So if you don't listen to people, you will assume people won't listen to you. If you get distracted quickly, you will assume people will be distracted with you, whether you are conscious of this or not. Now, take that into then a public speaking scenario. No wonder you're going to be anxious, because you're going into this situation just assuming no one's going to listen to you unconsciously. And then there's going to be anxiety. There's going to be, are people going to look bored? Are people going to be fidgeting? Are they going to be chatting to the person next to them? Are they going to be on their phone when I'm speaking? All of this is going to come up. And no wonder people feel so much anxiety around speaking. And actually, even it's quite funny if you go out and you observe, which I love doing. I love people watching. You might go and sit in a restaurant or sit in a bar, and often people will be together, but they're not actually present. So everyone's sort of sitting around a table, but they're all on their phones. It's like, well, what's the point? You might as well just be at home or going out on your own. So it's just so interesting. It's so pervasive now that we don't really use our voices. We don't even realize, because it's so conditioned in our culture. It's kind of everywhere if you actually look at it and you look for it. So all of this is really, your voice doesn't matter. No one's going to listen to you. So why bother, kind of thing. That's the kind of messaging unconsciously we're getting. The other aspect of this as well, I think, which has become more of an issue, I think, over recent years, is we really have a fear of healthy debate and being perceived as un-PC. And so you see people getting cancelled, you see people having their accounts shut down because they have a controversial opinion or a different opinion, people losing their job because they don't agree, or losing their bank accounts. That was a one recently in the UK. You've got an opinion that we don't agree with, so we're just going to cancel you. We're just going to close your account down. We're going to shut your bank account down. We're going to just get rid of you. We're going to silence you in some way, because we've lost this ability, again, coming from our education system, to really have a free, open debate. And I think when people feel really heard, you're not going to go into it from this defensive, attacking place. I think when people feel scared, that's when they attack, and that's when they get defensive. So we tend to see two sides of the same coin, really. Either people get shut down and cancelled, or you see trolls online that just write the most disgusting things about people, and say they want them to die, and really horrific things. And so we see these two sides of the same coin, where people just don't feel heard. They feel scared to express themselves. And depending on your conditioning will depend on how you actually play that out in the world. So, not everyone is going to be really abusive, but for some people, they might just shut down, they might just close their account down, or they might just get their account closed down. So again, we've lost this ability to just have real conversations. We're so scared to express ourselves. And then we wonder why public speaking is so terrifying. So was something else I was going to say. Oh, and the last point I just wanted to make as well. I had a few points because there's actually so much to talk about here. I was like, actually, when you start to look, it's everywhere. I work with a lot of people as well in business, in the corporate world, and different industries. And in fact, I did a podcast this week with a doctor, and she was saying even in the medical world, there is no training around the voice. There's just nothing. And so if you don't actually invest in it yourself, again, like everyone else, you just suffer and you struggle. And these are people that are using their voice every day, talking to patients, perhaps delivering training, perhaps running events, meetings, etc. They need their voice. And I've worked with GPs and doctors before who are literally speaking all day long to patients. So again, it's just part of this wider culture of the voice isn't actually important. The voice doesn't matter. We don't invest in it. Businesses don't really invest in it. They might send you on a day workshop. That's kind of it. Your voice isn't going to change in one workshop. It requires at least 2 months of consistency. And again, I guess it's better than nothing, but you're not going to change in one workshop because there's a lot of shifts that have to occur. So start to think about in your culture, because it might be different to my culture, how this shows up in your world in terms of maybe where you work. Have you been given any training around speaking or public speaking? Have you been given any support? I mean, another group of people that I work with as well, authors that go out into the world and go on book tours. I've heard this a number of times. They're not given any training in speaking on big stages. And these are authors that spend most of their time sitting behind closed doors writing books, often on their own. And then it's like, right, you've got to go and do a book tour. But we're not going to give you any training. We're not going to give you any support. Just go out there and do it. Now, if you happen to be given a decent advance for your book, then you've got the funds to go and pay for someone like me. But if you don't, then you're just flung into the lion's den. So again, it's just it's not seen as important. And then we wonder why people struggle with their voice. So we have to really start to become aware of this conditioning, because this is what's really at the core of your anxiety with speaking. Because otherwise, you're always going to fear expressing yourself. You are always going to fear sharing your voice. It doesn't matter how much you practice, you are always going to have that fear. And so my work is really, with the Jungian psychology hat on, is really about looking at this conditioning. How is this actually driving your voice right now? And then looking at the shadow, when the shadow is a Jungian concept of what we push away unconsciously. But in your shadow is the voice that you say you want, is the voice that you want to feel free, to feel confident, to feel like you can stand on any stage and speak. So we have to not only become aware of our conditioning, we have to look at what we've pushed away in our shadow, then we have to learn to integrate it. And when you combine this newfound understanding of your psyche and how you've protected yourself with the voice training, with the voice exercises, then you are really free. Then you are truly free to express yourself. And I'm not saying you won't have any anxiety because we're human, we still have an ego. The ego is all about survival. So there's always going to be an element of anxiety. But my goodness, it's going to be far less. And actually, what I find is those nerves you can actually channel into energy in your speaking, energy in your voice, in whatever capacity. I mean, I sing and I definitely get nervous before I go on stage. And it's interesting because you probably wouldn't know looking at me, but I will feel the butterflies, etc. Sometimes, I mean, particularly if I'm playing the piano, my hands might shake. That's a little bit more obvious, which is really annoying because I can't stop it. But again, it's just using that energy, which the ego will either, we can either say is nerves or excitement. So it's not that we want to get rid of it, we're just rechanneling it. So really, really important. The other aspect of this as well, because we've learnt that the voice is not that important, because that's what society is telling us, it means that we've lost connection to our voice. It means that we've lost connection to expression, to dynamics, to variety, of pace, of pitch, of timbre, of color, of tone. Like the voice is just flat and boring because we've shut our voice down. And a lot of the expression that you want in your voice not only has to be driven from inside out, but you have to have an instrument that's capable of it. There's got to be strength in the instrument. There's got to be flexibility and stamina in the instrument. That's not going to come from not using your voice or barely using your voice. So there's so many aspects to this. So I'm going to talk now about how we can reconnect to our voice. And then I'm going to share something at the end. I have a special offer for Black Friday, which is today. I'm going to share that at the end. So if you're interested in this deeper work and you would like some private support, I'm going to share a way you can work with me from January next year. But I'm just going to share the offer today because it's a special weekend offer. But let's talk about, first of all, how we can reconnect. So the voice is a mind-body instrument, as I've talked about. You can't just focus on one, you have to do both. Otherwise, you are going to be limited. But here I'm just going to talk more practically about how you can reconnect. So first of all, it's physically getting in touch with your voice. As I said, children don't have a problem with this. They make noises, they run around the house screaming, shouting, making weird sounds, copying, mimicking. I love it. I mean, it's actually amazing. I just absolutely love it. And we lose it. So we want to reconnect that childlike curiosity. Now, obviously, if you live with other people and you don't want to sound like an idiot, maybe find a place that you can do this. Maybe you drive to work, or maybe there is a time in the day where you have the house to yourself. And just play around with making noise. And one of the things I talk about a lot is warming up the voice. I've done lots of videos on this. I've got a whole PDF you can download, free PDF you can download. The links are all below this video. But really, you want to start to play around with the edges of your voice, the range possibility in your voice, explore the edges. So I use, straw is brilliant, you can play around with making noise with a straw. You can just do a just make noise, sirens, just move the voice around. And almost like the sillier, the better. Because I bet you will be quite surprised at what sounds come out of your mouth and what is actually possible. But if you are feeling a little bit like, I don't really know what to do, then, as I say, download my free guide because I will take you through exactly what to do. Or I've got a video and I will put the link below to that video to take you through some things that you can actually do. But this is the first stage. You have to start to reconnect physically to your voice. Just start to play around, bring that childlike curiosity, playfulness back into your voice. Now, the next part of this is, and I say this all the time, I do feel like I'm a broken record a lot of the time. When you're practicing your speaking, so let's say you have a presentation to deliver, practice in front of a mirror and record yourself because lots of reasons. One, if you're practicing in front of a mirror, then you get that immediate feedback. You see straight away, what do I do when I speak? Do I do weird things with my face, with my shoulders? Am I poking my chin up or forward? Like, what am I doing? Am I fiddling? So stand in front of a mirror and get used to seeing yourself speaking, but actually also record yourself and listen back because what you hear in your head is not what anyone else hears. Again, I say this all the time, but I still don't think people believe me. So record yourself, stand in front of a mirror. Now, then what you can do is take a paragraph, perhaps of a presentation that you've got to deliver, or a training, or a speaking engagement, or whatever it is, doesn't really matter. And I want you to read it 5 times with a particular focus on each of these 5 areas I'm going to talk about now. So the first one is pace. So if you are someone that speaks really fast, I want you to deliberately slow right down, even if it seems really silly. Just start to play around with varying your pace. If you are someone that already speaks slowly, try and speak a lot faster and see what happens to your voice. So vary it, and play around with pace. The next one is pauses. Again, this is one of the quickest ways. If you feel anxious in the moment, what the mind will say is just say something, just say something, just do something, just say something. But what I encourage you to do is to start to pause. So when you feel anxious, take a deep breath and don't say anything. But it does take practice because we feel like we have to fill silences. So practice pausing. And one of the easiest ways to practice pausing, if you don't really know what to do, is think about pauses as grammar. If you had your presentation written on a piece of paper, where would you naturally have a full stop, a comma, a new paragraph, a colon, a semicolon? Where would you naturally put the grammar in? And then I want you to replace that grammar with pauses. So if it's a new paragraph, you might have a longer pause. If it's a comma, it might just be a quick pause. If it's, doing bullet points, for example, you might pause between each one. So use pauses as grammar if you are struggling to know how to do that. So we've got pace, we've got pauses. So you're going to read this 5 times and practice each of these. Number 3 is volume. Now, this is a tricky one because volume, interestingly, requires quite a lot of coordination with the voice. To vary volume requires quite a lot. So, but I want you to see if you can vary, speak loud and see what happens, and how you feel. Oh, no, I shouldn't be loud. Or speak really quietly and see what happens. What does that do? How does that change what you're saying? So play around with volume. Even if you don't necessarily need it in this particular scenario, just get comfortable with playing around with volume. Number 4 is intonation, which is the variation of pitch. So if you find that you're quite monotone, the chances are you don't have much variation of pitch. So you sort of talk like this and there's not much movement of your voice at all. So what you might want to do is, say, for example, decide, okay, I'm going to start deliberately, the start of every sentence, I'm going to raise my pitch. Hi, my name's Anuska versus hi, my name's Anuska, for example. So just deliberately start to raise your pitch. until this starts to become more normal, more natural to you, that you don't have to sort of think so much about it because it's a natural part of your expression. And then finally, it's vowel length. So in the English language, A, E, I, O, U. Now, we can completely change the meaning of, well, not necessarily the meaning, but the tone and the feeling of what we're saying by lengthening vowels or shortening vowels. Think about vowels as how we communicate emotion in the voice. So consonants are about meaning, vowels are emotion. So if you struggle to find clarity in your voice, the chances are there's not enough clarity of consonants. If you struggle to bring emotion into your voice, the chances are you're not living in the vowels. It's too harsh. So you can take a sentence. So my name is Anuska. Again, I'm exaggerating as a point, but play around, like stretch those vowels. Play around with the vowels in your words, your words. Or you could say words, and then it's very sort of staccato, very harsh, or words. And then you can find your rhythm, you can find your natural way of speaking. But a lot of the time, we don't even know that these tools are available to us. So these are the 5 areas I want you to focus on. So practice, take a paragraph, a short paragraph, practice varying pace, pauses, volume, intonation, the pitch variation, and lengthening vowels, and see what a difference it makes to your voice. Record yourself, watch yourself, and then, just start to bring a little bit of this into your speaking. And I guarantee you'll be far more engaging to listen to than if everything's just shut down, minimal expression, minimal dynamics, minimal variety in your voice. And then the final part, so we talked about physically getting in touch with your voice. The second part, we talked about speaking in front of a mirror, recording yourself, practicing these 5 areas. The final part is my thank you. That means I don't have to put this in the comments later. The final part is visualizing. And it's so underutilized, but I guarantee that anyone that's really successful in their field, particularly in the sporting and the music community, they use visualization all the time to imagine the outcome, because the mind doesn't know the difference between what you imagine and what you perceive with your 5 senses. So what I suggest you do, particularly if you're feeling very nervous about an upcoming event, presentation, etc., is visualize yourself already there. Decide what you're going to wear, visualize yourself in those clothes, visualize yourself in that venue, in that meeting room, in that space, wherever you are. Maybe you're sitting in front of your computer. Doesn't really matter, but visualize yourself there and visualize how you want your voice to sound, how you want to feel, and how you want the audience to react to you. So do you want them to look really interested and engaged? Do you want them to ask questions? Start to visualize everything. The more you can do this, the more that will become your reality. So one of the things I always do, particularly with singing, so if I'm doing a show, I will always go and do a recce of the venue. And I will always know what I'm going to wear, because I will have a special dress, or I'll go and buy a special dress for an event. And I will go to the venue and stand on the stage and get used to the view I'm going to have. And then I go away and I visualize myself singing on that stage or speaking on that stage. Now, if you don't know where you're going to be, just do your best to visualize yourself in some environment that you think is sort of similar. But if you can go to the venue, or you know what the venue is, or you know what the room looks like, visualize yourself there. Be there already. Be in the end result. And I guarantee you will feel better. I do have some visualizations on my YouTube channel. I might put I think some of them actually might be private, but I will link to at least one below because it's such an important skill and it will change how you feel from the inside out. So, they're the three areas to focus on for reconnection to your voice. Physically get in touch with your voice, speak in front of a mirror, record yourself, practice those 5 areas, and start to visualize. I promise you, if you do all of that, you will feel quite different. However, as I said before, there's so much going on unconsciously with our voice. And if we only work on what we're conscious of, we're really just rearranging the furniture. So, yes, you can practice, you can do all of this, and that's great, but you're never going to create lasting change. You are always going to feel like there's still anxiety. You still can't really enjoy yourself when you're speaking. And you're always very worried about what people will think, how people will react. You're not fully present in your body, and consequently, you're not fully present in your voice. So, I've got a special offer for Black Friday, which is available until midnight Sunday on GMT. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about this. And if you are interested, I have opened some spots in my Calendly. Again, link is below. 20-minute spots. You can have a free chat with me over this weekend. So you'll see if you go in there that there's free spots this weekend. Normally, I do charge a fee because I want to make sure that people are serious when they do these sessions. But I want to just give you an opportunity, if this is something that you're interested in, to have a chat with me before you book. If you don't want to have a chat with me and you just want to book, I will also put the link below to make the deposit, but very happy to talk to you if you do want to find out more. So my Speak with Impact private voice coaching program is my signature program. And it's really the only thing I offer now, other than the one-off Reclaim Your Voice session. It's the only thing I offer because I have come to realize that offering casual sessions doesn't work. You have to be committed. And so it's an intensive 2-month program where you work privately with me. You have unlimited access to me between sessions. So you can email me, you can WhatsApp me, you can leave me voice messages, you can send me audios, videos, etc. And you get 6 private sessions, 6 one-hour private sessions across that 8-week period. At the end of the 8 weeks, then for the following 6 months, you then have 2 further private sessions you can take with me, and you still have access to me. Not the kind of unlimited access, but you can still email me, you can still ask me questions. So you can see this as like an 8-month sort of container, essentially, if you are looking for that support. But the first 2 months is the intensive part, because we know it takes 2 months to really create change, create real change and real habitual change. And I know from my own experience and working with hundreds of clients across the world that it's so easy to fall back into old habits. It's so easy to think you're doing an exercise correctly and you're not. It's so easy to let that conditioning drive what you do or what you don't do. And so I want to give you the maximum support in those first 8 weeks. And then after that, you are going to just feel more confident to go out into the world and just do your thing. But you know you've always got me there. And you can absolutely ask me questions. And you have a couple of sessions that you can take whenever you like in that 6-month period. So normally, it's a £5,000 investment, but normally it's a one-off payment. So it's a one-off £5,000 payment. Or you can split it across 3 payments. But what I'd like to offer for Black Friday is today over this weekend, over the next 3 days, you can actually split this into 4 payments. So you make a payment this weekend, and then you don't owe anything till January, and then you make a payment January, February, March. So you're going to make 4 payments, but you're able to spread it out. So you would make 4 payments of 13, 12, 50. So 1, 3, 1, 2, 50, 13, 12, 50. You make 4 payments of 13, 12, 50, 1 payment this weekend. The next payment wouldn't be due till January, February, March. So you're able to spread the cost, because I recognize not everyone has £5,000 just to spend like that. But I so believe in the value of this work. This is your voice. You cannot put a price on it, and you will make that money back. I say this to people all the time. You can make £5,000 from a public speaking engagement, just one. So, or you can make more than that actually. So I know the value of this work. And it's, you're getting my time, you're getting my unlimited time in those first 8 weeks. So if you're interested, as I say, you can either just put the deposit down, and I will put the link below if you want to put the deposit down, and then I can be in contact with you and we can, arrange the first session, etc. And I will send you an agreement to sign, or feel free to book a 20-minute consult this weekend only, because this offer closes midnight Sunday. So I will put all the links below, but if you're interested, please get in contact, because I don't normally offer it to give you so much sort of assistance, I guess, in terms of spreading the cost. And really part of the reason is because I only want to work with people that are really serious and really committed. And I do believe that when we really want something enough, we will find a way. And if we don't want it enough, we'll find an excuse. And that's okay. But we just have to be honest, because we've all been there. I've spent I probably spent 100 grand on coaching myself. So I am walking my own talk, and I know the value of it. So thank you so much. I hope that you found this useful. Even if you don't decide to work with me, that's all good as well. Just get all you can from my videos. I have lots of free content. I also have an online course, so you don't have to spend any money if you don't want to. But if you really want transformation, then the only way is really to work with a coach, because otherwise you're just spinning your wheels. And I say this from my own experience. So thank you so much. And if you have any questions, feel free to comment below or book a session this weekend. Take care. Have a lovely weekend.